Good afternoon in Asia and good morning in Europe. Welcome back to Friends Thailand National Conference on Internationalization at Home with the topic Internationalization at Home, a new normal in the internationalization of higher education. I'm Maria from Prince of Songkla University, and it's my great pleasure to be MC for this afternoon session. During the morning session, we had the opportunity to gain valuable information and knowledge from two excellent expert speakers. And now for the afternoon session, we have here with us four knowledgeable speakers, eager to share with us their great expertise and, of course, experience. So firstly, may I remind to our audience that after each presentation, they can share their questions with us, yeah? So you can type your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand after the presentation. So now, please allow me to introduce our first keynote speaker. Mr. Darren McDermott is the team leader designate of the European Union's Support to Higher Education ASEAN region, or shortly, the SHARE program. He has worked on many European Union Commission and British Council funded education development and capacity building programs with ASEAN member states ministries and higher education institutions. Today, Mr. McDermott will give a keynote talk on the topic, the SHARE program, lessons learned from the EU's flagship higher education program in Southeast Asia. So without any further ado, Mr. McDermott, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good morning from Dublin in Ireland, where I suppose I am doing internationalization at home, but not for long. I'll be returning to the region very soon. I'd like to thank the Friends Network and the institutions who've organized this conference for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. It's the first such meeting I've done in a while. The reason I'm home is that I welcomed my first child into the world a couple of weeks ago. Well, it's coming up on a month now. So it's been all a bit of a blur, but it's nice to be able to come back and have a meeting like this and get back into the swing of things. And what a topic. I think it's a really timely intervention, a really timely discussion, and nice to see the structure in which it's being addressed. I think you've had a very interesting morning. In fact, I know you've had a very interesting morning because I was in conversation with PTIP and Dr. Nathirapong last week, and I know that they're excellent speakers, and they gave you a lot of food for thought and a lot of insight into this topic. Two very hard acts to follow, I must say. So, and particularly after lunch. So I hope you've had a good lunch, and I hope I can keep your energy levels reasonably high, which is why I would like to certainly ask you to bear in mind some questions as we're going along. I certainly don't like the idea of giving a lecture. I'm not a lecturer. I'm a mere consultant, so I would like your questions. I would like to have a discussion with you about any of the topics in my presentation that you find of interest, or you'd like to find out more information on. So I am the team leader of the SHARE program. What does team leader mean? Well, I suppose it means I lead the technical delivery of the SHARE program. So I oversee the work with our partners and how SHARE's overall objectives, specific objectives, are carried out in the course of the program. I've been in the role since February 2020. So as you'll remember, within a couple of weeks of that, we had the World Health Organization declaring a global pandemic. And for a mobility program such as ourselves, that turned out to be a bit of a problem. But I think, as I can maybe address later, it also provided a number of opportunities which we tried to capitalize on and tried to broaden out. Today, I'm not going to be as detailed perhaps on internationalization at home, but I will touch on it. But I think I'd like to explore the idea that internationalization at home is really a case of identity. It's a sense of where do we locate ourselves? Where do we see as being home? And yes, home can be your home institution. It can be your region within the country. It can be your city. It can be your country itself, but it can also be a wider region. And I think from a European perspective, we have experienced that. Certainly in Ireland, when we talk of identity, yes, people will generally say, yes, I'm Irish first, but they're also very proud to say that they're European. And that's borne out by statistics, where well over 90% of people say that they are proud and happy to be members of the European Union, which is, I think, a very high percentage when we look at other parts of the continent at times. But overall, the European project, I think, has been strengthened in recent times and faced a number of challenges together. So I will share my screen, and just to remind you to please keep the questions coming. So I think this is the right way. Yeah. So I'm not too out of practice. But yeah, let me just make this full screen. Okay, I've crossed out the word lessons learned from, because I think it's as much lessons learned by. We as a program have learned lessons in the process of our implementation. So I don't think it's really a case of us being sages on the stage or standing here and saying this is the way to do things. In fact, we've learned as much, and I personally have learned as much from this experience as I could have in any other setting. And I suppose that also goes to learnings I've had in Thailand at large over the last 10 years or so. My first European project was actually in Thailand with the Office of the Higher Education Commission. And I worked with 2 projects focused on internationalization with the Bureau of International Cooperation Strategy, or the BICS team at the Office of the Higher Education Commission, which is now within the Ministry of Higher Education, Science, Research and Innovation. And I must say this was, a formative experience for me, because it was where I first really learned about ASEAN. It was where I first learned about all of the initiatives that are underway in Southeast Asia to create greater internationalization and greater alignment, but also collaboration across systems. And I suppose it's also where I thought of this idea that, well, internationalization at home or internationalization in general, it's very context-based. So you can really only talk about internationalization in terms of, or an internationalization strategy in terms of your own context. And that is where it finds meaning, that is where it becomes valuable. So just go to the next slide. Mindful, of course, that SHARE is a program with ASEAN, but ASEAN is not all there is to Southeast Asia. So we do have great colleagues in the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, the Regional Center for Development. And they will say, of course, well, Southeast Asia also includes Timor-Leste. But thankfully, we are seeing great movement for Timor-Leste to become a formal member of ASEAN. And that is due to happen, I think, well, let's say in due course. The EU itself has been working with ASEAN since 1977. It's also it's very easy for me to remember this and the number of years of partnership, because it was 77 was the year I was born. So this year we're celebrating the 45th anniversary of EU and ASEAN partnership. It has been elevated to a strategic partnership, and the EU works across the region with all member states and the ASEAN Secretariat based in Jakarta on any number of issues. Education is, of course, a priority, and that's where we find the SHARE program. So the SHARE program office is located in the ASEAN Secretariat, but I would say we spend as much time on the road and meeting, at least now we can meet with our partners around the region. So SHARE, as I've mentioned, is an EU-funded project. And the overall objective then is to strengthen regional cooperation, enhance the quality, competitiveness, and internationalization of Southeast Asian higher education institutions and students. Internationalization is a key word here. And I would say it's the modality in which we frame everything we do, because we are looking at having more consistency, more readability, greater cohesion between systems, be it in quality assurance, qualifications frameworks, credit transfer, and we arrange and organize policy dialogues to discuss all of these issues. So SHARE has been running since 2015. I was at the first policy dialogue in 2015 in Jakarta. It was August. But it is coming to an end. It's coming to an end at the end of this year, at the end of 2022. As I've mentioned, our base of operations is in Jakarta, but we are widespread in the region. And I suppose thanks to the consortium approach that we have, so our consortium partners have offices or maintain offices across the region as well. And of course, we have close partnerships with universities, 33 SHARE partner universities, and numerous organizations which we work with on a day-to-day basis. We look very closely at the strengthening of ASEAN identity, and there's that word again. So, you know, do we consider ourselves ASEAN institutions? Do we consider ourselves of the region? Is it, you know, something that's written into our work, or is it something that we explore ourselves? And, you know, ASEAN has been around quite a long time. I think it's celebrated its 52nd anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, if I'm wrong on that, my apologies. Something I should have down at this stage. But yeah, so ASEAN is certainly a strong entity, but perhaps the way the EU operates and the way ASEAN operates are somewhat different to each other. The EU being a little bit more centralized in some of the institutions, whereas ASEAN has a lot more control amongst the member states. And that's, I suppose, another interesting aspect of the way we work. Okay, just scroll here. Okay, so SHARE has worked on a number of areas. If I'll just go back here, under the British Council, then we have general coordination or stakeholder engagement and policy dialogue. You may have attended a SHARE policy dialogue. We've had 15 of them over the course of the program, and the most recent was in Hanoi at the end of July. The IaH looks after qualifications frameworks and quality assurance, and they also address quality assurance in collaboration with ENQA, which is the entity responsible for qualifications frameworks in Europe. And then our colleagues at NUFIC from the Netherlands look after the student mobility and credit transfer system. So we all collaborate together. I work with all of the consortium partners, and we've been delivering on these various result areas for much of the last, well, what is 8 years at this stage, an 8-year initiative. So first to stakeholder engagement and policy dialogue. You may recognize some faces there. I don't mean my own, but to the left we have Dr. Choltis from the ASEAN University Network. We then have Dr. Romyan from the Simeo Raihed. You'll recognize your permanent secretary for the Office of the Higher Education Commission, or the Higher Education Framework in Thailand, Dr. Roger Chow, then from the ASEAN Secretariat. So this is our policy dialogue in Bangkok between the 29th and 31st of March 22. The focus is very much on higher education partnerships and how they contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. So this was our 14th policy dialogue, so the one just before last, and I really mark this as a key policy dialogue, because I think it was it was our first physical meeting after the restrictions of COVID-19. It was the first policy dialogue we were able to do in hybrid format, but it was also one of the most inclusive and participative in terms of the organizations that were sharing the stage and also shared the development of this policy dialogue. So you can see the logos of Simeo Raihead and UNESCO. We also had Asia Europe Foundation joining us on this as well. So, you know, I think this is where we've been moving in the region. It's not a case of EU entities coming into the region and saying, well, this is how we think you should do things, but it's share convening dialogues with key ASEAN, Southeast Asian organizations and determining a way forward, whatever the topic, whatever the context. SHARE has also worked with the ASEAN Secretariat on the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity, two such studies, one on enhancing intra-ASEAN student mobility, and the other on employability, which is due to be finished very soon. And these are, I suppose, key documents that set an agenda and look at policy directions for moving beyond the SHARE's life and how things can be taken forward. We are, I suppose, one of the most broad stakeholder engagement initiatives on higher education taken within Southeast Asia in recent times. As I mentioned, we've had 15 policy dialogues, and we are, I suppose, due to collaborate with Simeo Raihead now on their symposium in November, begins on November 24th in Bangkok. So really all of this is about moving towards that ASEAN identity or Southeast Asian identity of higher education internationalization. Internationalization for the region, internationalization at home. We have really focused in recent times as well on doing online and hybrid policy dialogues. I think in the early days of SHARE, we had a hotel conference room, and you know that came with limitations. There were only so many people we could invite and fly in to attend these meetings. But with the hybrid approach, the online approach, very similar to what you're doing today, you can reach far many more people, and more people can have a stake in the conversation and kind of a say. So we see this continuing. I suppose this is a new normal, that we need to be inclusive in our discussions. And if we are discussing students or we're discussing institutions in a policy dialogue, then they need to be represented as well. So that's inclusion, equity, diversity are very big components for the region, also for Europe. Our colleagues in IaH and ENQA have looked very closely at qualifications frameworks and quality assurance. Another master plan on ASEAN connectivity study on graduate employability. There's been another feasibility study on outcome-based education in ASEAN, and that's another important component of our work, is putting the focus on outcomes of higher education, outcomes of initiatives within higher education, and really that is the only way we can measure the impact of higher education initiatives and international education initiatives. So our approach within the program at all levels has been outcome-based. Quality assurance is an essential aspect of higher education. And colleagues at IaH and ENQA have worked very closely with the ASEAN Quality Assurance Network to strengthen their processes and initiatives and ensure that they remain a key entity within ASEAN and within the region for ensuring or assuring quality. There's been a lot of work then on internal and external quality assurance. As I mentioned, the work done with the ASEAN Quality Assurance Network, there's also been a grant given to them to enable them strengthen their processes in their headquarters. Student mobility then and credit transfer, I'd say, was one of the main modalities in the early days of SHARE. I suppose it was the most visible aspect of SHARE, given that policy dialogues tended to be amongst policymakers, quality assurance discussions were amongst quality assurance professionals. But the wider community of higher education institutions and students were engaged in the student mobility components. Up to the pandemic, we had 5 batches of intra-ASEAN student mobility. And you can see the figures there, varying degrees of inbound and outbound uptake from different countries. I suppose you are probably looking at Thailand in the sense that there seem to be significantly more inbound students than outbound students. And if I move on to the virtual exchange program, there hasn't been as much uptake there. We're still looking at that. We're still looking at the analysis of these numbers, and I suppose what lessons we can draw from this as well, maybe in the way we communicated with our Thai partners, Thai partner institutions. Or it could be the case that they had their own initiatives. But we're very pleased overall with the coverage and the uptake of this. We engaged 9 ASEAN member states. I suppose something that hampered us initially was that Singapore and Brunei were not eligible for funding on this due to their socioeconomic status and inability to receive ODA. So we worked with them in other ways, but we were able to bring Brunei into the virtual exchange and collaborative online international learning program. And I suppose you're seeing then in this slide a pre-COVID experience of internationalization and a post-COVID. I'll go into that a little bit more, but clearly we couldn't implement physical mobility during the pandemic. So we had to adapt, and we implemented significant capacity building in virtual exchange and COIL, or collaborative online international learning. We also looked concertedly at the development of digital credential systems and a digital credit transfer system platform. There's been significant capacity building done in this area for partner universities and other institutions. And we're very pleased that the uptake of these programs, virtual exchange, has been significant in the limited time it's been running. But we don't see this going away. This is not a replacement of physical mobility, but something that is complementary and also a mechanism for internationalization at home. We'll touch on that in a bit more detail shortly. So this is some of the feedback that we've had from students. I must say that these were physical mobility students, but I think what we draw from it is that a sense of self, a sense of place, a sense of identity and an understanding that higher education goes beyond borders in Southeast Asia, and these students readily grasped that opportunity. It was referred to as something precious, that it was something that contributed to their competitiveness. I suppose all of the things that go with an international experience, where you're in a very different environment, you're challenged, you're stretched, and you need to engage. This was described, though, as beautiful memories by our second student here. And again, very much a sense of this maritime territory, the idea of Southeast Asia as a single entity, but something that she could identify with. And then the final quote there, it's important to know Southeast Asia, the Southeast Asian region, as part of your community before perhaps going to study in another continent, before going to study in Europe or the US. I think we've always been told, you know, you should know your own country, you should know your own region, maybe before you go and explore further afield. I think there's a lot to be said for that, and a lot to recommend ASEAN as a place, or Southeast Asia as a place for study, not only for Southeast Asian students, but also for students around the world. And the significant uptake of European students coming into the region as well. So I've mentioned outcomes, and I would say that this goes to the core of what SHARE has done as well. We have, of course, look to the European experience, and we have taken, I suppose, learning from that in the establishment of Erasmus, in the establishment of the Bologna process, and the ongoing work around regional integration and harmonization of higher education. But fundamentally, you know, they are big concepts. Fundamentally, what matters is, you know, what is the teaching and learning that is happening, and with the emphasis on learning. What are the outcomes for students? And internationalization has found itself criticized in many ways of being elitist, of not being inclusive, of favoring students with the wherewithal and the funds to travel, while neglecting other non-mobile students. And the European Parliament recognized this. They did a study on internationalization of education, and they called for it to be more inclusive, less elitist, not focusing on mobility, but on the curriculum and on learning outcomes. And we can say that this is all about internationalization at home. It's providing an internationalized experience to students, even if they don't go abroad, providing the sense of an identity that is greater than a national identity, and you know, a regional identity. I think if we look at the issues that we have in the world a lot of the time, we could maybe surmise that if more students had an internationalized education, a sense of what lies beyond their borders, and you know, how other people live, then we may not have some of the problems we're facing at the moment. So internationalization at home, I think PTIP and Professor IaH has really gone through this in detail in terms of what it means for Thailand. But I do want to, I suppose, connect it then to this idea of identity. And this report itself focused, was published by the Asia Europe Foundation. I was involved in the third chapter, and actually contributed this to the third chapter. But it's all bound up in the idea that higher education is for everyone. It is not an elite pursuit. It is not something that should only favor those with money. If you have I think the ability to enter a higher education institution, the duty of care is within the education system and within the institution itself to ensure that you are prepared for what lies beyond. And this, the idea that we have, well, some experiences for those with money and other experiences for those who don't, is really not something that can be tenable much longer. Virtual exchange and collaborative online international learning, as we've touched on, it does address this, but I think ideally you will have the ability to combine these two aspects, or you have the ability to internationalize your campus with the presence of international students, and that then goes to comprehensive internationalization as well. So this was an early piece of work, relatively early in 2015, and this report just came out last year, but I do recommend taking a look at the report. There's a lot of valuable content in there over the 4 chapters. I think if we look at Southeast Asia's position, it is becoming more of a center of gravity in the world, and increasingly with the regional comprehensive economic partnership, the development of entities like ASEAN, I suppose economic power that is emerging in the region, the fact that it has such a young population, the fact that so many of the startups of the world are emerging here, you see that regional identity emerging, and that it gives itself a home, okay, and there is a home emerging. I'd like to, I suppose, allude to 2 interesting graphics, and both coming from the current dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School in Singapore, and Danny Kwa. So if we look at the first one, that circle represents, there are more people in that circle than there are in all of the rest of the world combined. So if we were to look at the balance of humanity, it rests in that circle. And you can see that Southeast Asia is clearly centered within that circle. I think we're just missing a little bit of Indonesia, a little bit of Eastern Indonesia in that, but the rest of Southeast Asia is well covered. So, you know, if anything, it can be Southeast Asia setting the agenda on internationalization for the rest of the world in very soon. This is another quote on the economic center of gravity, and generally one goes with the other. So the more people you have in a place, the greater the economic power of that place. And since 1980, they've been tracking this, and the scale is 1980 to 2050. So I suppose we're currently, if 2015 was in Bandar-e-Masar in Iran, we're probably a bit closer or over India at this point, and then moving inexorably towards Southeast Asia as well. So economic center of gravity, greatest population in the world, largest regional economic partnership, which was agreed at, I think, the 34th ASEAN Summit in the regional comprehensive economic partnership. So all of these indications tell us that ASEAN, Southeast Asia will be setting the agenda in many aspects of the world and in popular culture. And then why not in terms of international higher education as well. just, yeah. So we do need to go back to the context, though. And what is the context of international education? Those who've worked with me in Thailand over the last 10 years will maybe be a little bit sick of this diagram, but I still find it has a lot of use. If we look at the core mission of our institution, or let's say our program, we need to ask the question, who do we serve? What is the purpose of this for the people who are in the class? And that's very much bound up in outcomes. If we're considering internationalization initiatives, we need to consider why. And there's an excellent quote, I think, by Hans de Wit, who's a well-known theorist in international education, originally from the Netherlands. I believe he's now based in the US. And he says, you cannot define the what and the how, an outcome of internationalization strategies, without first having answered the why. And I agree with him, but I do think we need to understand where we're coming from first, and what our institution is about first, because not all institutions are research universities. Not all institutions have a department of medicine. There are institutions that focus more on agriculture, which is imperative in the world that we live in. And perhaps a first step before medicine, because we can say that our food is actually our medicine, and if we're eating well, then we can forestall any illnesses. So, but this idea of why we are internationalizing, it shouldn't be a case of, well, we're doing it because everyone else is doing it, or we're doing it because the rankings say that we have to have a metric on it. And it particularly shouldn't be about the rankings. And I think P. Tip will have touched on this as well. The rankings should not dictate what happens in higher education institutions. They are abstract constructs by generally private sector organizations. They do not seek to serve higher education, they seek to serve themselves. And as a result, they lead us down a blind alley. If we're planning strategy or we're planning interventions on the basis of what the rankings tell us. Yes, it is important to benchmark. Yes, it is important to measure quality, but there are many other ways of doing that than subscribing to the likes of QS or Times Higher Education, or I could go on. We also need to look at the dimensions of our internationalization. Is it solely focused on the international office, or is it focused on broadly in the institution? Where do we see the aspects of internationalization within our institution? And then, I suppose, and only then, we can look at the activities to internationalize. But it really shouldn't start with activities and then dimensions, and then maybe somehow we work out by a process of regression why we're internationalizing. We need to, yes, as Hans says, look at the why, answer the question why, but answer that question within the context of our own institution, our region, our home. What is our natural home? So moving back, I suppose, to the context that Cher and the rest of us found ourselves in, COVID-19 was an exceptionally difficult time for higher education. We can say it is an inflection point. It is a critical juncture in Southeast Asia's higher education and much of the world's higher education. It changed the landscape. It changed how we do things, even at a most basic level. Mobility was taken off the board as a piece or a modality we could use. It just wasn't there. And we needed to find some way of maintaining that international element within the curriculum. In the early days, I suppose, many of us were struggling with technology. This platform, Zoom, seemed to come to the fore, and many others as well. And I think it was a great time for ed tech. But we also needed to remember that the emphasis wasn't on the technology. The emphasis wasn't on the medium. The emphasis was on what we could achieve with that medium and how we could achieve it. So we needed to look at what were the objectives of internationalization, what were the outcomes we wanted to achieve. And yes, we all innovated and adapted, some more successfully than others. Trial and error. We had, discussions, heated discussions, I would say, within the SHARE program, but also with partners on what was the right way to approach this. But I think to our credit and to our benefit, we listened to our partners. Before we made decisions, we sat down and we had detailed discussions with our partners on what was the best way forward. And I think one of the things that we were lucky to chance upon was this idea of virtual exchange and collaborative online international learning, and the fact that it was collaborative. It wasn't a case of students sitting on a Zoom lecture, maybe like this, and listening, but they were actively engaged. They were actively involved in what was happening. Lecturers were able to work with each other on curricula and on programs that they would then deliver together. So this co-creation was happening in a way that it maybe wasn't happening previously, where they were sending their students off to another campus, another university in Southeast Asia, and weren't familiar with the lecturers there, weren't necessarily familiar with the curriculum there. Obviously, there was some effort at matching and ensuring that students were in the right kind of program for the wider program they were pursuing. But yeah, this co-creation aspect helped create a greater identity, a greater cohesion and community amongst higher education lecturers. So, we looked at the overall community of stakeholders, and we had I suppose a natural break ourselves. So between the end of June 2020 and the end of February 2021, the SHARE program wasn't operational. We, I think, had a gap between funding cycles. So the SHARE extension then was running between 2021 and currently, or the end of February 2021. And that gave us a lot of time. That gave us time to, I suppose, think how we would approach this and how we would plan the next phase. That was a luxury, I realized, and it certainly wasn't a luxury that many higher education institutions had, because they were constantly operating. They were still had to deliver for their students. So it was an opportunity that we took to listen and learn. We were able to reframe the approach to internationalization within the SHARE program, and we worked more so, I would say, than we had previously with higher education practitioners and students. We were then able to cast the net wider for stakeholders and experts that we would work with. We identified wonderful experts in the area of virtual exchange, collaborative online international learning, digital credentials, and they're still working with us and helping the community to this day. And we also had to look at the ownership and sustainability, because we realized that, well, look, we're not going to be here much longer. What happens after Share ends? How do the outcomes of our program get taken forward, or how are they improved in the time that we have left? So we had a lot of discussions around that as well, and we determined the timeline, the engagements, the milestones, and how we would transfer ownership. We're still somewhat in that, and that's a work in progress. But there have been some good developments. At the last policy dialogue, we were able to launch the roadmap on the ASEAN higher education space 2025. So that is a component of a wider initiative on regional harmonization that was worked on by Share, the ASEAN Secretariat, but the ASEAN Working Group on Higher Education Mobility, which was launched by Share in 2021. And this is perhaps the most representative working group on international education, internationalization in the region. It is primarily made up of senior officials of the education ministries, but also the leaders of regional organizations working on international education. That, though, wouldn't be enough. And we realized this, and with our focus then on practitioners and students, we worked closely to establish the community of practice of higher education practitioners, which was launched last November, also at a Share policy dialogue. And just as of yesterday, we now have a declaration and plans by students of the region to develop the Southeast Asian Student and Alumni Network. And the idea is that, yes, we can have policymakers discussing the direction and how to pursue the regional integration of higher education. But without the voice of higher education practitioners, such as many of you, or students, that is only a fraction of the picture. So we need to have all of the constituencies, all of the stakeholders of the Southeast Asian higher education community working together, contributing to its development. And I think this is something that will be sustainable and will ultimately be owned by the higher education community in the region. And it doesn't necessarily require the significant input of a program like Share, even though there is still a need for capacity development. So with that renewed focus on ownership and sustainability, Share is in a better position than to, with its partners, with the region, regional policymakers, practitioners, and students, take forward the agenda against the ASEAN work plan on education, foster greater engagement, ownership, and sustainability, have greater people-to-people connectivity and knowledge transfer across the region, and look at how ownership is delivered, or ownership of this initiative is delivered and owned by nominated entities. And we're very excited at the prospect of a joint declaration and vision on the common higher education space in Southeast Asia, which can be taken at the high officials meeting, or the higher education ministers meeting in early December. So I would say watch this space, and there will be a new declaration, not to replace the Kuala Lumpur Declaration, but I think to build upon it with the initiatives and the change that has taken place in ASEAN higher education in recent times. The important thing to say about this joint declaration is that it is from the ASEAN Secretariat, but also the CMEO Secretariat and CMEO RIHED. And those of you who would be familiar with the policy level discussions, is you may be aware that not all was well, particularly in the higher education space, with these actors. I would say that there was a good deal of tension between the organizations in 2019, but that has been, I think, addressed. There's been changes of heart, there's been changes of focus, there's been changes of personnel. And I think both organizations realized that they needed to be working together a lot more consistently in order to deliver the future of a common higher education space. Working in a silo on something like this, only having your own agenda is never going to work. It needs to be inclusive, it needs to be participative. And we're really impressed with both the Education, Youth and Sports Division at the ASEAN Secretariat and CMEO RIHED for all the work they've done together over the last year or so to bring this about. And it allows us then have much more of a rounded community, much more of a cohesive community to stand on a stage at a policy dialogue and say that these are our commitments, these are the things we wish to achieve and bring forward. So SHARE has been around for a long time. I think we have contributed something certainly to the region. If anything, we've contributed a platform and been able to convene the discussion, but we've also contributed frameworks and other structures that we hope to be owned and sustainable by the region. But all of this has been done in partnership. It hasn't been, solely done by SHARE. In order to internationalize regionally and to develop regionally, you have to have regional engagement. Without buy-in, without engagement by the main organizations, the institutions, and the students, it's not going to happen. I believe the Prince Charming concept was brought up in the idea of Cinderella. SHARE has never sought to be a Prince Charming to ASEAN higher education, and in fact, it wouldn't have worked if we were. We have always sought to be a partner side by side, working with the institutions. I think perhaps we focused in the early days a little bit more on the policy level, but we've certainly changed that over the course of the program and worked much more concertedly with practitioners and students. We cannot take policy and strategy on internationalization and map it from one context to another. It has to be grounded within a context and developed within that context. So there is no idea that SHARE took aspects of EU policy and internationalization strategy and transplanted it to ASEAN. That would never have worked because they're very different regions, very different traditions, higher education traditions, and very different, I suppose, visions of what is to come. So that would never have been workable. Regional engagement, sustainable internationalization requires trust, and it takes time to build trust. The time we spend actually is the currency of trust, but it's also how we work together and how we engage. I think once trust has been established, anything is possible. But that is really a first step. And then we see this brand of internationalization in Southeast Asia, with all its diversity, with all of the interesting aspects that it has. It's coming to the fore. We're seeing it much more visibly, and institutions are feeling at home with that approach. I think it's a fascinating time for education. We have really come through one of the most difficult times, but I think we're coming out the other side far better for it. And there's so much still to be done, but we're developing that critical mass of interest, of engagement, of trust that allows us develop that sense of identity, that sense of home, feeling at home with regions, with the region and with institutions across the region. There are many other things we've learned, but I do want maybe some of those to emerge in some of the questions and discussion. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I'm not sure to what extent I have time left, but thank you and much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDermott. So yeah, very insightful presentation, and I think we learn a lot from this, and we hope that you said that the nominated entities after share will go further with this process. Very nice. Thank you very much. So now it's time to open the Q&A session. You can raise your hand or you can write your questions in the chat box, yeah, for us. Please feel free. Okay, we have a hand raised here. George, please.
Hey, Darren. Thanks for the presentation. I think that was pretty informative in many aspects.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, earlier on in the presentation, I noticed that I found it. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep, no problem.
All right. Yeah, early on the presentation, I found it interesting that this project has not been funded solely by the EU, but also from the British Council. So could you please elaborate a little bit on that? Like how did that happen? What is there like a focus area where the British Council came in, and what happened during Brexit? Did any of that change and going forward? How it's going to happen? Thanks.
Yeah, it has been one of the questions that has emerged, but I suppose the share program began pre-Brexit. It began before the referendum was flagged in the UK, and I think, as we all remember, right up to the referendum, people didn't really think that Brexit would happen. But again, many things in that year, 2016, we were wrong about. British Council has been in the lead role. They have led the consortium of share from then until now. And in the extension phase, which was agreed in 2020, but then I suppose it began at the end of February 2021. British Council said that they wished to contribute funding to the program, and this was gratefully received, I think, by the EU. I would say, though, it is a much smaller amount than the overall. So the total amount is 15 million euro over the course of the 8 years, and the funding by the British Council was in the region of about 200,000 euro. So it is significantly smaller. I suppose co-funding suggests that it's much larger, but there was a funding contribution by the British Council. British Council remains, I suppose, heavily involved in higher education in Southeast Asia, and that's very much within their mandate. But I do understand that perhaps a future iteration of SHARE or a follow-on program will not have British Council in the lead role, and it will be led by a European or an EU, should I say, entity, EU higher education organization.
Thanks, Darren.
No problem.
Thank you. Yes, anyone has any other question? So if not, may I ask a question? Because
Please.
you have a lot of experience in working with the international area. So as you said that mobility used to be a big part of the SHARE program, not only SHARE, I think mobility used to be a big part of all internationalization at universities. So do you think that once now the situation comes back to normal little by little, but do you think that mobilities will be back to like the way before, or the virtual mobility will still have a big share on this?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that we can take what we've learned during the period of the pandemic, apply that to internationalization at home, because I think it is a great modality. It used to be, I suppose, almost a curiosity. I know from speaking to people who've been involved in virtual exchange and collaborative online international learning for years, they said they were kind of overlooked, within the institution. But I think we've seen that it can deliver so much value. So for us to do away with it entirely or neglect it entirely would be a mistake. I see already the movements within Erasmus Plus that it is being recognized in a much greater way. So I think when you have organizations like that, and also in Southeast Asia, the regional organizations implementing it, then it's unlikely to disappear, and hopefully it can evolve into an even greater form. I mean, we're looking at the metaverse now, we're looking at Web3. There are numerous possibilities for a more virtual approach to internationalizing the curriculum.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So, okay. I think we overlap a little bit the time, but it's okay because it was a very insightful presentation. So
one last question, please. One last question.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay,
so
please.
I'm from Nepal, and Erasmus Mundus program. Since I work for a European Union consulting company, I worked in a European Union consulting company. So what
Can you get closer to the microphone, please? Sorry, we cannot hear you clearly.
Okay. So my question here is, only few people related to European Union, they only know about Erasmus Mundus program. But the one who actually deserve it, the one from remote areas and other, and very hardworking as well, they have no idea what Erasmus Mundus program is or what the SHARE program is. So my question is, how can these people get connected to such important programs like SHARE program and Erasmus Mundus programs?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. That I suppose visibility, despite great work done by the Commission to raise the visibility, through its networks and through the various delegations, it can't reach as many people as we would like to, and maybe that is, I suppose, the role for other modalities, because the number of people who can go to physical mobility programs is certainly much less than those who can participate. There's not a simple answer to it, and it's bound up in funding. It's bound up with I suppose the conditions and I suppose the education networks in the region or in the country itself. But I do know that Erasmus Plus and the programs under its purview, they are looking for a much more international focus in the next phase, which has just begun. So I think this is something they're aware of and they are addressing. But I don't speak for the Commission just to say. I don't speak for the EU. I'm the team leader of a program that's funded by the EU. So yeah, I can't be quoted on that, I'm afraid.
Is there any firm site, Facebook page, and anything like that where I can get information updated about these things?
Yep. So if you put Erasmus Plus into Google, you'll find pretty much everything you need to find there.
And about SARE?
About Share is solely focused on Southeast Asia, the ASEAN member states.
Only ASEAN.
It is coming to an end at the end of 2022. So I think we're in that closure period really already.
I'm from Nepal actually,
Yeah.
but right now I'm in Thailand. I'm studying in Thailand. So
Okay.
am I eligible to apply for this SARE program?
You would have been if you were attending a Thai institution that was a partner university. So it's not about nationality; it's about the institution you're attending.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. McDermott, and thank you all for the questions. So now it is time to introduce our second speaker for this afternoon session.
Very much.
Yes, thank you. Professor Dr. Richelle Lamadrid is the Director of University Research and Innovation Center of St. Louis University in the Philippines. She has extended experience in the international cooperation under Erasmus and capacity building programs, similar to Friends project that we mark today. Professor Richelle will share with us on the best practices of internationalization at home in St. Louis University. So, Professor Richelle, please, the screen is yours. Please turn on your microphone, Professor Richelle. We cannot hear you. Your microphone is muted.
Okay, so everything's okay?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so yeah. Again, good afternoon to everybody, especially the host of this national conference, our friends from the 3 universities in Thailand. I gather there are largely students who are also attending this conference, and I'm quite honored and privileged to be invited to talk about the best internationalization at home practices from my university, St. Louis University, Baguio City, Philippines. I'm currently the coordinator, promoter of the EU Friends project, hence the reason why I'm here with you. And at the same time, the director of the University Research and Innovation Center of my university. Allow me to start my presentation with a story of a little girl from the province who would be tickled pink or excited whenever she would see an airplane hovering over her house, and she would one day dream to ride one, and that dream came true when she was able to save enough, and the first country she went to was Malaysia. And so from there, I will be moving forward with the outline of my presentation. I will take it off from the framework of the organizational development, how we have embraced campus diversity and internationalization at home at SLU. So I'll start off with Friends Kickoff and other IaH initiatives, moving towards motivating to embrace IaH, creating a vision, developing political support, managing the transition, and sustaining the momentum. So I'll start off with how it came about for SLU. But of course, we know quite well that prior to Friends coming in our door in 2018, we have had a number of internationalization initiatives. So internationalization is not new to us, primarily because SLU has been in existence for 111 years to date, and Belgian priest founded our university, and up till this time we have foreigners around, and even before. For the 111 years, we used to have priests, Belgian priests as our presidents, and only currently that we are having our second Filipino president. So it's no surprise and even quite a common sight to see to interact with foreigners, in particular Belgians. And if you will be moving around physically in our university right now, we have Belgian medical students who are frequently having their internship in our School of Medicine and our hospital. So with this, but then again, with the advent of friends in our university in 2018, we now concretize what we mean by internationalization. We now put a brand to it by now adopting this EU project called Friends, which is furthering international relations capacities and intercultural engagement to nurture campus diversity and to support internationalization at home. So from here, we move further with all our initiatives. But prior to that, let me just contextualize the beauty of this Friends project and internationalization at large. So we know quite well that globalization is prevalent and pervasive. Multinational corporations or even local companies always engage with the international and local clients. And so it stays and it seems it's constant that we are exposed, especially with the COVID right now, to the virtual platform where we see the world at a bigger perspective. And moving forward with the advancement of new technologies and Industry 4.0, the sharing peer economy, the free movement of goods, capitals, people, and others, immigration, the rising nationalism across the globe. And we see this in Ukraine against Russia, local and regional ethnic conflicts, Myanmar, Pakistan, Rwanda, local globalization challenges such as a loss or an of culture, cultural revitalization movements, and internationalization and globalization of higher education. So as the theme goes to date, where it's a new normal nowadays to embrace internationalization at home. And for the students out there, because primarily my main target audience are really the administrators and faculty and staff of the university, but I know quite well that there are students out there, and perhaps you can relate to this kind of cultural complexity in front of you, where in Asians and Islamic countries, it is considered normal for men to hold hands or kiss each other, either on the cheeks or the lips. But however, in westernized countries, it's such an affront. And that is why when President George Bush, the former one, did this, Americans really created quite a stir. And so goes with the comparison between President Obama and former President Trump, where President Obama had to bow down, and accordingly, he ought to have stood tall, just like Donald Trump. But I leave you to ponder on which one, from a cultural perspective, is most applicable. And so, with all this context that I have presented to you, the personal solution that this EU Friends project is actually proposing is to build intercultural awareness and sensitivity to cultural diversity. And of course, the development of global competencies and global mindset. So from here on, we now propose on how we can provide those solutions to our population. And here comes the concept of internationalization at home, which is the purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum for all the students within domestic learning environments. So thus, let me just emphasize, the focus is how do we internationalize, or what are the ways in which we can adopt this or absorb this international and intercultural dimensions by implementing formal and informal curriculum initiatives. So the Friends general objective in behalf of SLU is, again, just to reiterate, is to strengthen SLU's internationalization capabilities and to develop students' global competence through the integration of intercultural dimensions into SLU's formal and informal curriculum. So from there, we move on to the first step from an organizational development framework. Now, we have to answer the question, as Darren said, who are we serving? Who are we serving? So first off is to motivate the embrace of IaH in our university. So we started off promoting and encouraging buy-in. So from this slide, you may see how we kickstarted this internationalization agenda by hitting first our faculty and staff. We staged a roundtable discussion. We talked about the indicators, performance indicators of internationalization in the light of strategic cooperation, partnerships and capacity building with the international credit mobility, faculty and student mobility, uh, adoption in a formal curriculum, and the like. And before we cascaded everything to our general student population, we started off hitting first our student officers. We have various organizations, student organizations, together with our faculty advisors. We oriented them on what IaH and cultural diversity is from a Friends perspective project. And we moved on to university-wide information dissemination for both our graduate and the undergraduate students. Interestingly, last August 15 and 16, 2022, the first intake, our freshman students, 100% of them were required, and they trooped to our gym in order to listen to everything all about SLU, and especially the topic on IaH and cultural diversity under Friends project. So we also enjoined our international students to support this endeavor. We have more than 100 plus nationalities, and already a number of international students. In fact, when we had our international students freshman orientation for this semester, we have had different nationalities from Indonesia, Japan, Russia, Malaysia, South Korea, and a lot more. So now these international students are our partners in propagating the IaH in our university. And the most critical aspect of our buy-in, no, who ought to be the most important stakeholders in our exploitation and dissemination of IaH, is our faculty from the School of Teaching Education and Liberal Arts, who are tasked to teach one subject, which is entitled General Contemporary World Subject, in which, because of their acceptance of the prescription by our top management, they have readily adopted massive open online course on intercultural awareness and cultural diversity offered by Friends project. So 28 to 30 plus faculty across our university are now adopting this IACD MOOC. And what do we mean by this? For those who are privy to this and have undergone the intercultural passport virtual module, you know quite well what's in it for you. That is, you're finishing a MOOC as well as a submission of DS video would lead you to get that intercultural passport award. But hold that thought, because I'll get back to you in terms of the achievement of SLU in the light of this particular initiative. So my point here is that the first off, who are we serving? We should know the grassroots, the important recipients of this proposal to internationalize. It says here on the slide, information is a source of learning, but unless it is organized, processed, and available to the right people in a format for decision making, it is a burden, not a benefit. That's why it's important that before you come up with a grandiose plan, it has to be first the most important stakeholders that you ought to reach out to. And these are our students. So moving on from a motivation or motivating to embrace internationalization at home, we now can move forward, having garnered the attention of our population to set a direction. We need to focus on a direction. We cannot blow an uncertain trumpet. Otherwise, we go astray as to our direction. So in this setting of direction, interestingly and essentially, we actually transition from the old vision mission statement, if you will allow me to state it. We used to have this vision mission statement at the bottom, which states SLU envisions herself as an excellent missionary and transformative educational institution to develop human resources. Among the 4 C's, we always hit on the 4 core values, which are creativity, competence, Christian spirit, and social involvement. We are a Catholic organization, so Christian spirit is critical as our core value. And so when we adopted and when we exploited this new trend and the new normal on internationalization, we had to position ourselves so that there is a purpose why we do this. And it's easy for people to align their actions and initiatives along this particular eyesight, which is now our vision mission statement is stated. We are committed to developing locally responsive, globally competitive, and empowered human resources, again, with all the 4 core values. But the emphasis now is on locally responsive and globally competitive and empowered human resources. So from there, we added up the infrastructure to support this vision and mission, in which we are grateful to friends also behind the idea of setting up a tea house, where it is a multicultural hub. It provides a calm and relaxing place where intercultural awareness and cultural diversity flourishes and converges. As we speak right now, there are the Jordanians, Chinese, uh, a Russian guy who are frequently visiting the place. No, and this is also, since we are a Catholic school, that is also a place where the Muslim student population can also do their prayers. So again, aligned with what I have been presenting with this step, I just would like to reiterate that it's important that we ought to know where we are going so that we will not end up somewhere else. So from number 2, when we set up that creating a vision, it's also moving towards with walking the talk. The emphasis is on management's championing and driving initiatives. So we need to develop political support, and we know how all the programs, projects at the bottom will not go well at all if there's no blessing from the top. So all initiatives actually will be most likely succeed if you have the top management support, because resource when it comes to finances, infrastructure, time, effort, especially of the implementers, are very critical for the implementation and success of any internationalization initiative. So we started off with that. The team of core implementers of this internationalization project has to have, or we have had, series of dialogues, conversations with our top management and the management team in order for them to understand where we are coming from. Interestingly, we know that sometimes only a handful of the top management may be privy to the agenda of certain power group. And that cannot be when it comes to this particular topic. It has to be equal for all, where everybody ought to know the movement of one as it has a domino effect on the others. And besides, it's a global world out there, and the technology facilitates information sharing for everybody. And I'm happy to tell you and to note that one of the best practices of SLU is to set up this core team of internationalization implementers. And these core team are actually behind the student support and care. It's not just any units for that matter, or any center that which can be available to go for this project, but it's really handpicked, in which these kinds of units or centers are the most exposed to or responsible for student support and care, be it local or international students. So we started off with the man at the top, our vice president. For academic affairs, we have our international relations officer, also the director of our external relations, media communications, and alumni affairs. We have the guidance office director. We have the student affairs office, the registrars, and yours truly. No, and I have an identity crisis, perhaps in the light of this topic on internationalization, considering that my background is more on the research and innovation. But mind you, people, since I'm the main promoter or coordinator of this project, I do the role of the driver of the team. So I'm taking the internal networker, where I pull in people and I utilize my network and my charm, perhaps, to encourage and to motivate everybody to join in on this bandwagon of internationalization. So I have high hopes for the sustainability of our project, primarily because this particular team is intact and quite helpful and productive enough to pitch in order to move and sustain this project. So the emphasis is on walking the talk. So from developing the political support, we come now to managing the transition. So if I may borrow from Darren's presentation earlier, so I started off with who are we serving with the motivation. And I told you why we are doing it, because we need to really address the non-mobile status of many of our student population. Not everybody can afford to uh, internationalize, and thanks God for the virtual mobility that we are now exposed to because of digitization and technology. But with this non-mobility and with uh, the low cultural exposure and understanding, there's really a need to go for this managing the transition. So as Kurt Lewin in organizational development would uh, the framework that he proposed, you ought to unfreeze whatever we used to have before in terms of the limited view of the world to the changing and now the refreezing part. And how do we refreeze? So how do we now bring home this internationalization at home in our domestic environment, considering the limited mobility, physical mobility of our student population, who are the most critical stakeholders. So our fourth step or strategy is to educate, to invest, and to develop our human capital. And looking back at the earlier buy-in of our general contemporary world faculty, we have and they have finally adopted this IACD, Intercultural Awareness and Cultural Diversity, massive open online course in our formal curriculum. This GC World, General Contemporary World subject, is actually taken by all undergraduate students. And we started offering this IACD MOOC in April of 2020. So it's 2020, 2021, 2022. How many semesters ago? And every semester we have had intakes of enrollees. And most likely, if you will physically come over once again to our environment, you bump into a student, except School of Medicine and School of Law, And if you would ask, have you taken up an IACD MOOC? Most likely, almost 80% would tell you yes, a resounding yes, because this is 100% a compliance of our students and included in their curriculum. And with that, we have created the GC World syllabus, where it incorporates globalization, internationalization at home. It talks about culture, communication, differences in culture, and so the like. And so it is quite an achievement. I don't know if any university in the world has achieved this number of MOOC completers. And so we are proud to say, and with pride also, that we have hit this number to date. And so long as MOOC is offered in our university, this number will go up. So currently we have 19,515 students that completed the MOOC and have been exposed to the intercultural awareness and cultural diversity. And so the MOOC actually intends to develop students' intercultural knowledge and skills, not just the mindset. And of course, the mindset that also will go through if you are exposed to all this factors brought about by the enrollment of this subject. So that is why a testimonial by one undergraduate student stated, MOOC expanded my knowledge on diversity and the importance of international relations. I was able to interact with others as well, which opened my network drastically and helped me see how it is to interact with other people who don't have the same background or life as I have. And another MOOC testimonial from a developing country, sometimes we fear technology. And so with the MOOC, it facilitates adoption of technology in terms of an online course. And so this MOOC completer mentioned that I've taken up an online course from Erasmus France, and I am already planning to take other online courses, such as Harvard University's humanities subjects. This is an affirmation of what MOOC has done wonders to our students. Now, companies are not just after bachelor's diploma, they are also after extra online courses that our students can present. And this is one that already is assured and ensured that a student can get hold on to as part of his or her resume or bio data when applying for a job. And aside from the MOOC, we also encourage our students to submit a digital story. A digital story is like a TikTok. It validates international or intercultural prior experiential learning evidenced by relevant student digital stories, by making a storyboard, by drawing on experiences, by uh, uh, feeling it on how it is to internationalize if it's not a direct experience. You actually put some leverage on the mindset, no, or the understanding of students on how it works, no, from an internationalization point of view. And we're hitting also 138 on this, and all the YouTubes are also online for everybody to have a look on how our students have developed that level of knowledge, mindset, and skills globally. So there. And I mentioned if a student would get the MOOC plus the DS, they get this intercultural passport certificate. So for those who are not yet in the know on what this means, an intercultural passport, it's a metaphorical supplement to the official international passport that one normally uses when traveling. So once you are given this certificate by your friend's team from your respective university, it's actually a validation of acquired competencies in the fields of intercultural awareness and communication and cultural diversity, and it is considered as an asset by the recipient and, more importantly, by prospective employers. So Aside from all those adoption in our formal curriculum, St. Louis University is also into sustaining and increasing accreditation of various programs through quality assurance locally. And grateful to EU for a number of projects that improve our curriculum, referring to the best practices out there. And we recently concluded our entrepreneurial ecosystem project, and we have embedded some of these practices, best practices that we drew from our partners for this project, from a university in Iceland, in Italy, in Ireland, in Indonesia. And all those exposures have increased the competencies of the faculty and staff. And as what we have been discussing right now, the Friends Project, where a number of partner universities are also into the picture. Of course, we have one from Budapest, who's also a speaker tonight, this afternoon rather, IaH from Turkey. We have the lead from Bulgaria, and we also have from Poland, and the implementers coming from Bhutan, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. So the platform is just so helpful and facilitative of internationalization at home. And we now get to have a peek of the best practices there are and comparing our best practices so that we can also adopt it in our respective university, especially the home away from home program when we had our retreat online, where we are exposed to the practices of each other. And from there, we put all this plus and plus together and come up with a better one to serve our students' population better. And Antenna, no, Antenna is also an EU project that we are also blessed to be part of. Antenna is more of a macro, an EU macro project, where the goal is to set up internationalization network. The a university from Spain is at the helm of this Antenna. They are also in charge of uh, assessing and evaluating and monitoring the infrastructure of internalization in a university, how our international relations office is working, the management, the governance, and bringing in also a number of best practices from all these universities that are partaking of this Antenna. And the latest project we are having right now is with Marconi University in Italy, and also a university from Spain on the trust. And the implementers are Vietnam and the Philippines. So we are about to launch our master in financial technology. We couldn't do it alone. No? So we are grateful for our European counterparts for bringing home all this innovation on our formal curriculums at our doorstep. So further than the Friends project, we have set up a number of strategic cooperation, partnerships, and capacity building. Again, VUM is generous enough to partner with us with a transnational education student mobility. We have had already 2 cycles. The first cycle, we sent 5 students to take up a number of business subjects there. And also recently, another batch of 5 students went there this year and came home. And we are looking forward to a 3rd cycle early part of next year. So an English camp with the British Council is also in the works, and it's ongoing. So with a partnership with the US Embassy, helping us out in our makerspace. And SLU is also a member of the Inter-University Student Exchange Program. And our International Relations Officer is about to attend a meeting in South Korea for this AIMS project. So pre-pandemic, we have had outbound 19 students and inbound 29 international students, and lots of inter-university alliances. We have alliances with Thailand. We send medtech students, and likewise they also send Thai students to study English in our university. We have a very long-term partnership and engagement with Belgium, being our source of history, because we are founded by Belgians. I myself is a recipient of this student mobility. I studied my PhD at Ghent University, Belgium. Uh, And so I've been exposed to a number of cultural differences. And so this topic on internationalization is very close to my heart. And hence the drive to really uh, bring to the mindset of our students this idea has become so personal, because I know quite well that not everybody can travel because of the cost involved. And so the non-mobility will now be done, and the exposure to such, if you bring it at home with the exposure to formal and informal curriculum. So from a formal setup and formal initiatives, we have a number of informal initiatives, informal events and activities that which we are exposing our students to. So the Friends Project also has brought 5 students to attend an intercultural awareness, cultural diversity boot camp in Bulgaria for a month. And these now 5 students are automatically promoted to become ambassadors of SLU. To Hubnab, no, in the picture on the right, you may find these are international students from China, from Nigeria, talking with our ambassadors. And during the freshman orientation for our new intake for this semester, these 5 ambassadors also spoke in order to introduce themselves. Soon we will be having Friends Beyond Friends reach out on internationalization to 4 universities in order to propagate the beauty behind this IaH, and these ambassadors will serve and will give their testimonials on how it has transformed and revolutionize their lives to widen their horizon on the world out there. So we have a series of webinars, the exposure of which again will validate and increase global competencies, a national conference on equity, diversity, and inclusivity, an international and intercultural day, an ASEAN intercultural festival, also hybrid and the F2F events. No, as we have invited a number of seasoned speakers that will talk about globalization, the benefits of cross-cultural management, global employability skills, and etc. And as we speak right now, we are actually having our career fair in our covered court, and it was an outstanding success. If I may, be modest about it, we've got thousands of graduating students who flocked and are still flocking to date as I speak to you right now, because we were able to invite more than 30 companies, and they physically attended. We're expecting that they would just be sending their audiovisual presentations, considering that 90% of these companies are actually from Manila, and Manila is 4 to 5 hours from our location. But perhaps they're more interested to come up because we've got a very good temperature here than the rest of the Philippines. Baguio is so-called the summer capital of the Philippines. That's why everybody finds a reason to come up, and there is a reason right now for them to be attending this career fair. And this career fair now has that theme, which is local markets for global talents. And we emphasize to our students that because of the COVID situation, virtual mobility, they could be employed locally, physically, but yet their clients may be all over the world. And so opening up their horizon for that possibility, and the possibility and the potential, no, for them really requires that they ought to develop and be open to the idea of being equipped with global talents. And we have emphasized that on why we have invited not just locally owned by but multinational companies as well. Texas Instrument is within the locality, and most of our engineers have trooped to apply. There are so many hospitals that also attended, where our nurses, because for your information, people, the population of SLU for the university is 25,300 for the first semester, and we have 7 schools. Yeah, 6 schools. We offer nursing, we offer um, medical technology, radiology. We have liberal arts, teaching, education, business, engineering, and architecture, um, graduate school, IT, everything. I think even law and medicine, we offer everything. And so this number of population really has made this career fair successful enough. That's why all these companies have been so excited. When I spoke with them earlier, they're just so excited with the number of attendees that we are having currently. And again, just to emphasize, for this particular step, we need, and to ourselves, we have to emphasize that we really have to translate whatever vision we have in terms of globally competitive and locally responsive and empowered human resources. So without continual growth and progress, such words such as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning. And so, with all this in place already, with all the preparations, with all the education, etc., our next step is, of course, to sustain the momentum, meaning we're there. Our one time, I had this conversation with our international relations director, and when we bumped into each other, she said, "Oh, Richelle, I was just speaking on the phone with some university partners, and we were talking about internationalization at home. That's in the Philippines. The discussion were all part was all together with partners, some university partners in the Philippines, and they were talking about internationalization at home. It seems like it's like quite a something new to them. And I was telling them, oh, that's not new to SLU anymore. Oh, we've been doing it, and now, of course, we have that brand, which is IaH, thanks to friends, no? And thanks to VUM for engaging SLU with all these practices and projects. So now, our next challenge is to put these systems in place, that we have to sustain this, because that is the new normal. The new trend right now is to internationalize. And just the right timing, we crafted our strategic plan, and in the last 5 years of our strategic plan, we never had this key result area that was explicitly indicated in our strategic plan. But for 2022 to 2027, the way forward is already to indicate that in our strat plan, which states excellent institutional reputation is recognized by the global community. And so you can see the performance indicator, and each of the 6 schools that we have in SLU must come up with their own KPIs. So the first one, just to walk you through, we have international, intercultural, and global dimensions of the university are integrated and promoted. Number 2, internationalization of formal curriculum in at least 2 major courses per programs are ready. Number 3, at least 5 students, faculty, or staff per school participate in exchange or mobility programs, whether virtual or physical mobility, for academic, internship, extension, or outreach programs. I think this is where we are weak right now in terms of faculty mobility. Perhaps our Thai partners can invite us, no, to be a teacher, no, in your universities, and to teach. And likewise, on our part, we can do the same. So number 4, at least 2 courses per program can offer and credit international courses in the university. At least 1 international MOUs or MOSs per school is forged in the light of strategic cooperation, partnership, and capacity building. At least 1 internationalization at home activity per year per school is conducted. And so we have that. And so we now can be assured that this is going to be sustainable, and hopefully be already naturally become part of the DNA of St. Louis University. And in this is the second year we will be celebrating our Internationalization at Home Week, and it's already indicated in our academic calendar. And we release this academic calendar every start of the semester or the academic year. So in November, last August, we have this. And for next year, for this academic year, we will be celebrating from May 2 to 6, 2023. So everybody's looking forward to that. Everybody has to put in their share on the internationalization activities per school, per unit, per center, or like that. And now we are all struggling and rallying each other to vie for international accreditation. And internationalization is a must. With the Times Higher Education, with the QS World University Rankings, with the WURI, we cannot afford but to open our doors for internationalization. And aside from all these concrete measures that I've been discussing on how we have been implementing and disseminating and exploiting the brand of internationalization, if not for these intangibles, it will be for naught. So it's really critical that the environment of the university ought to have that aura, no? That element of collaboration. It goes without saying that information sharing should be open. There ought to be trust amongst each other. The support system has to be very positive. Social capital must be open to and welcoming to a new ways of doing things. And again, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. So with all these achievements that we have had so far, that has become validated now with our winning the 2022 ASEAN Icons Internationalization Awards, the first off in the Philippines, and we have bested other universities, and we got the grand prize. And this was awarded last July or August of this year, or recently, I think in September. And that affirms that what we have been doing so far actually paid off, because we had to submit documentation in order for us to get this particular award. So with the things that I had discussed, these are the best strategies that SLU has been doing in order to embrace cultural diversity. So first off, in sequence, we started promoting and encouraging buy-in. Then we moved to setting a direction. Then essentially, management's championing and driving initiatives is a must. And we moved into the education, investing and developing human capital, and making sure that we sustain momentum by putting systems in place. Now, for all the administrators, faculty, and staff out there who are attending right now, I leave you with this. I love quotes, as you noticed. So we have the ability to achieve if we master the necessary goodwill. A common global society blessed with a shared culture of peace that is nourished by the ethnic, national, and local diversities that enrich our lives. And speaking to the most important stakeholders of a university, the student attendees today, no, the love of one's country is a splendid thing. But why should we stop, or why should love stop at the border? So the Philippines share commonality with the rest of the world, and also our friends from Thailand that we have been interacting with so many physical meetings and online meetings. Our hearts, my heart reaches out to you. So it is important that we go beyond our differences. We have to emphasize coordination, partnerships, and dialogue so we can move forward in the same direction. Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Richelle. What wonderful quotes and wonderful perspective on SELU internationalization at home. So now we open up for the Q&A session. Please, you feel free to type your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Either one, if you would like to address directly the question to our speaker, Professor Richelle. Any question? Okay, any question out there in the chat? No?
Ah, Josh.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Michelle, yes. So you shared those numbers with the MOOC completionist at the SLU, and I think I can speak for all my colleagues that we are really envious of that lovely 20K. It's really beautiful. It's very clear that you guys have invested a lot into the MOOC. And I think you have shared quite a bit on the way going forward, your strategic plan until 2027. But what I would like to ask a little bit more is your thoughts on what's going to happen with the MOOC like 5 years down the road. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit 1 month, but I would like you to know your thoughts about it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
actually, we had our final report day as required by friends, and our major attendees were the faculty from the GC World, and they themselves asked the sustainability because their offering of the subject really rests on our MOOC. And as also indicated on our friends project, the MOOC has to stay alive for a 5-year extension, but open to tweaking depending on the permission that VUM will grant us on the technology behind this. Because our English department is also excited to copycat what Friends MOOC has done in coming up with an English MOOC as well, meaning it really has done wonders for us to, to have that exposure to, and the ability to also offer likewise. And since we have been offering English subjects to Thai students, to Chinese students, to South Korean students, they're coming over by numbers. And so we are now thinking of coming up with MOOC as well. Now, sustainability of the MOOC, we would like, if with permission of Varna, and I think they will permit it as well, to transfer the ownership to us in terms of the technological mechanism, so that we can sustainably offer it forever. No, but of course we will now be improving it along the way, because some of the insights may no longer be applicable.
Yeah, thank you, Rochelle.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I don't see any question now in the chat, but if you have questions coming up later, please feel free to convey them to Mahasarakam University. They are the host of this conference, so they will convey your questions to our speakers. So thank you again, Professor Richelle. So
and I would like to excuse myself because I have to run back to the career fair. So see you all, friends, in Thailand.
Thank you very much. See you. Bye-bye. Okay, so next we'll hear from a knowledgeable speaker with extensive experience in international education. So I would like to introduce Ms. IaH Deniz Özkan, the Vice Director of Global Education and Partnerships of Istanbul Aydin University in Turkey. Ms. IaH has been actively involved in many international programs, such as Erasmus, exchange and summer programs, summits and conferences. She also delivers training workshops on internationalization, internationalization at home, and intercultural competencies. Today, she will share with us the best practices of internationalization at home in Istanbul Aydin University. So, Ms. IaH, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. I would like to say hello to everyone and good afternoon to you. It's morning here yet. I'm very happy to be with the conference organizers, our colleagues in Thailand, and if there are other international participants, hello as well. I would like to share my screen now. I hope that you can see it.
Yes, very well.
Okay, very good. So I'm joining you as a partner to the Friends Project, Istanbul Aydin University. As a program country, we have done much less than our colleagues in Asia, actually, regarding the project. I was just listening to Richelle, and I know also other partners from Asia. They've done a lot to sort of put into action internationalization at home practices as they were envisaged in the Friends project. So we have done our part in the project as well, but what I will be sharing with you today are just very sort of practical examples of my university, not necessarily connected to the France project, but to internationalization at home in general. So, and Rochelle has done an excellent job of giving the definition of internationalization at home and the sort of the whole philosophy and the rationale behind it. So I'm not going to go into all of that and repeat that. Let me just start by very briefly introducing my university, Istanbul IaH University. We are quite a young institution, founded in 2003, but we have already more than 40,000 students and almost 50,000 alumni. We are very proud that 6,500 around of our student population is international students. And we have 13 campuses around Istanbul, but we have one large campus in Florya, which houses most of our faculties and most of our administrative offices. We have 12 faculties, a graduate school, a lot of administrative offices, research centers, etc. So we are quite a comprehensive university. Now, internationalization is a huge priority, and it is in the, of course, the mission and vision statement of the university, but it's also something that we do and practice daily. When you have so many international students on campus, we also run many of our academic programs in English language. We are part of the Erasmus program, and I'll explain that a little bit. But we have sort of internationalization as part of our university mission, vision, and daily practice. So we have also the administrative structure for it. We work under the rectorate, and we have one side of our sort of international office business dealing with international academic relations. So that's what I do, sort of global education partnerships. We have an Erasmus office because Erasmus is our biggest international program. And we also have a separate part of the international office that does international marketing, admissions of international students. And we also have support offices for full-time international students because they are a huge part of the student population. So quite a large international office, a lot of international affiliations. We are founder and also home to the Secretariat of the Eurasian Universities Union. This brings together about 100+ universities from Europe and Asia for international cooperations. We are part of the UNIMED, Mediterranean Universities Union, again, which is very active in terms of applying to European projects, also, you know, getting funding from other resources to deal with social, political, economic, and scientific projects related to the Mediterranean basin. We are part of the BusyNet Education Network. So this is a group of mostly European business schools, and we are also member to the European University Association. So I mentioned the large number of international students that we have, 6,500. And they come from very diverse, you know, backgrounds. 114 countries are represented. So we have students from, you know, Mexico or Malaysia as well, but many of them come from neighboring countries of Turkey. So many from Turkic republics, the CIS region, Balkans, Europe, Middle East, and North Africa, etc. So Turkey is in the middle of Europe and Asia and neighbor to the Middle East. So there is a lot of countries that we are historically, culturally, economically very close ties with. So that's where most of our students come from. But again, very distant countries also are represented in our international full-time students. We also have a large number of international cooperations with more than 450 universities from all around the world. Many of them are within the Erasmus scheme, so most of our partners do come from Europe, but all the rest are also represented. And you can see after Europe, you can see Asian countries as the second sort of largest region for our partnerships. This also shows the importance of the Asian higher education systems, their increasing quality, their determination and success in internationalization in the last decades. So we are very proud and more interested to develop our international cooperations with Asian higher education systems as well. So most of our international academic relations are within the Erasmus program. We do most of our student and staff exchanges and physical mobilities within the Erasmus program. We are also partnering with European institutions for European projects such as the France project. But outside of Europe, of course, we have cooperation protocols with many prestigious universities from all around the world. I showed the map just recently. And we also do short-term study programs for international students from, again, all around the world, but trying to also engage our international partners, our MOU partners. So we welcome international students, not just sort of exchange programs that are semester long, but also short-term study visits to our campus. So based on our sort of Erasmus agreements and cooperation protocols, we welcome and send a group of exchange students every year on a semester base for either 1 or 2 semesters. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of English medium programs in business, international relations, all sorts of engineering programs, foreign languages, dentistry, and medicine. So these programs are where we host most of our full-time degree students, as well as our exchange students coming from our partner institutions. So all these international students, of course, is incoming students, full-time students, help diversify our campus and make it truly multicultural campus. The exchange programs allow our students, our own sort of local students, to enjoy a global learning experience, to develop their intercultural awareness and competences. So we are very happy to implement student exchanges with our partner institutions from all around the world. Both the incoming and the outgoing students, as well as faculty exchange within these agreements, are an important part of our internationalization agenda. Now, the impact of the pandemic on student exchanges, this is important because the pandemic for a while stopped all the physical mobilities. This was important. Why? I mean, we knew that there were limits to physical mobility before. I mentioned we have about 40,000 students, but if you look at the number of exchange students incoming and outgoing, it's only a few hundred every year. So we know that most of our students were not able to enjoy physical mobilities, go on to study abroad programs in our partner institutions, and the same for incoming students as well. So we know that the number is limited, in study abroad programs. The students are not very diverse, both incoming and outgoing students. Let's be honest, most of the time they are students who come from more privileged social economic backgrounds. So they have a passport, they have the financial means to go and travel abroad, etc. And even in those cases, students face many challenges when they are trying to go on physical exchanges, study abroad programs. There are visa issues, there are financial issues. Once you come back, there is like curriculum matching issues, with the recognition of the credits that are completed while on study abroad. So there are many sort of barriers to study abroad programs or sort of global learning opportunities that are done sort of physically, right? I mean, this is nothing new. We knew this. So internationalization at home as a concept was around before the pandemic as well. And exactly because of these sort of barriers to physical mobility as a means to increase access and inclusion to internationalization and developing global competences of our students, etc. So again, this was nothing new. This has been around for a while, but sometimes it takes a paradigmatic shift to happen to shift sort of our focus. Right? This is exactly what the pandemic has done. As international offices, in many universities all around the world, most of our work hours were devoted to arranging these physical mobilities before the pandemic. But once the physical mobility stopped, we were able to shift our focus, shift our understanding, and really emphasize internationalization at home as a means to develop global competences of our students by providing them different sort of opportunities of global learning and engaging internationally, globally. So due to the pandemic, when the physical mobility stopped, again, digitalization was leveraged. These, Zoom technologies, these online events, virtual exchanges, COIL programs, none of this was new. None of this happened after the pandemic. They were there. But again, this paradigmatic shift of the pandemic allowed us to really leverage them, use them more efficiently. Therefore, during the pandemic, suddenly virtual exchange programs proliferated and became really the focus of our work at international offices. So what we did at Istanbul IaH University, again, practical sort of examples from my institution, we immediately developed a virtual exchange program, which allowed students from our partner institutions from all around the world take one online course with us for credit. But besides the course and the credits, we included in this package some webinars and some other sort of little programs that allow them to explore Istanbul, to learn more about Turkish culture. So we tried to emulate what would happen in a physical study abroad program, that exposure to a different culture, and just to get them sort of curious and involved and immersed, in a different culture. And at the end of these sort of webinars, and there were a lot of sort of independent readings that they were suggested, recommended to do. This was also sort of independent learning on our part, and that was engaging for them as well. So at the end of all of this, we provided also a certificate of intercultural learning. This allowed us to welcome a larger group of students from countries that were not necessarily sending us physically their exchange students. So this allowed our sort of exposure in many countries, and it allowed us to implement many of these MOUs that we have. But when they were not sort of being used in physical mobilities, in the virtual exchange programs, they were put into practice. So it allowed us to sort of really use some of these MOUs that were sitting in sort of cabinets, if you like, right? Not being properly used. So again, this allowed our virtual exchange program to reach a more diverse audience of students and international partners. Now, again, in the opposite direction, many of our international partners also offered virtual exchange programs, and we announced these programs and promoted these programs to our local students, which were very enthusiastic in signing up, registering for these virtual programs offered by our partner universities. More than ever, when we were doing physical exchanges, now with the virtual programs available, we sent virtually more Istanbul IaH University students abroad, and a much more diverse group of students to more non-traditional destinations. So, for example, we had many partners in South America, quite distant from Turkey, and it's quite an expensive sort of travel. So we weren't really sending physically exchange students to our South American partners before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, because of their online courses and the virtual exchange programs that they promoted and presented to us, to our students, we were really engaged with our South American partners. Many of our students are taking especially online Spanish courses with them. So that was very, very popular during the pandemic, and this is still sort of ongoing right now. Many of our students, for example, are interested in sort of Japan, South Korea. It's quite an expensive study abroad program. You know, the Turkish lira, especially right now, is not doing very well. So, I mean, you know, for a Turkish student to travel to Japan or to South Korea is a very, very expensive thing. So, but during the pandemic, you know, all our partners in Japan, South Korea offered wonderful, engaging virtual programs that our students were able to take and be exposed to their culture and learn the language a little bit, etc. Many of our partners in Asia, again, I would like to congratulate many of our partners in, for example, Indonesia. They were offering a lot of virtual programs on social and global issues, on environmental sustainability, etc. So our students, for example, were able to partake in those virtual programs. So this was a perfect example of internationalization at home, us offering virtual programs to our partner university students, and our partners offering our students wonderful, rich virtual exchanges that develop their international sort of exposure and their competences. Coming back to sort of internationalization at home, again, this is a perfect example of internationalization in the classroom. We were also hosting international lecturers and international visitors in our classes. Before the pandemic, physically, only a handful, right? Under the Erasmus scheme, there is mobility grants for visiting academic staff to lecture students. So we were doing that. But that's like, I don't know, 30, mobilities a year before the pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, of course, there was no budgetary limits, no time constraints. We could host so many international lecturers and visitors in our online classroom. So we started what we call the Global Connect webinars. In fact, it had started just before the pandemic as Global Connect seminars. So I think in most of our posters, we kept using the word seminars, but what we were actually doing webinars. So there are many sort of wonderful academics in our partner universities that virtually send their lecturers to our online classrooms. That was especially during the first year of the pandemic, when we had to pivot to online education suddenly, it was a difficult transition for our students. You know, they didn't have the face-to-face sort of campus experience. It was difficult and sort of depressing for them to be sitting in front of their computers all day long and just having online classes all day long. So in fact, this is like pedagogically, I think, very useful to host someone from a different country, to have a different academic perspective, new knowledge and information of how things were done in that country, etc. So this really mixed it up in the sort of maybe the monotony of the online teaching. So these are some examples. We hosted a Dutch lecturer talking about design thinking, for example. We hosted, a lot of business lecturers, language, culture in the sociology department. So, I mean, just many of these. And I think that we had some sort of international webinars and lectures that are open to everyone, but most of them were actually connected to one online course that the students were taking. So it was in their sort of syllabus or the curriculum for that course. So it was in a way integrated to that course for a couple of weeks. They had sort of international lectures, and to arrange that for that sort of matching of an international lecturer to one specific course, we worked closely with our academic staff. We also did webinars for our academic staff, again, to internationally engage them with their counterparts, to share experiences and best practices, especially, like I said, during that sudden change to online learning, which was also very stressful for our academic staff as well. Many of whom were not used to online teaching before the pandemic, right? So we brought on sort of international lecturers who were experienced in online teaching to share some online teaching and learning methods, pedagogy, online course design, etc. We also brought in, seasoned sort of experts in internationalization at home, facilitating global learning, how to run COIL programs, why internationalization at home is important, etc. So we were able to source a lot of experts internationally to talk to our sort of academic staff since the pandemic. I would like to also mention that because we have such a large number of international students on campus, as we went back to sort of face-to-face teaching on campus as well, but even before that, during the online teaching period as well, we were able to use our existing international students as resources for internationalization at home. They are ambassadors of their own culture and who can explain their sort of history, their culture, their sort of the richness of their sort of cultural heritage than the international students themselves. They are always very much excited and interested when we invite them to make presentations in various classes about their culture. So our international students are also guest lecturers sometimes in our classrooms. And in many of our courses, academic programs, again, there's an international student body there, and we encourage our academic staff, when there's a teamwork assignment, for example, always try to compose international teams. So when students are doing projects together, the sort of the study group or the work group or the project group is international. So students are getting exposed to different ways of sort of doing business in different cultures, right? There are also student volunteer projects that we run with various student clubs, local students, international students, going to, for example, local elementary schools doing volunteer work there, student mentoring and tutoring to young kids, etc. So our international students are also part of that. So we are trying to sort of use our international students in our social outreach as well as a resource. So again, this way, both our university students and students, maybe in elementary schools around our campus, are exposed to international perspectives, international ideas, different cultures. Now, we know that internationalization or learning in general doesn't happen only in the classroom, but the campus itself is the platform where things happen naturally, organically, that students are exposed to different ideas, different cultures, different perspectives. This is how they learn and develop, not just professionally, but as an engaged global citizen as well. So we are very lucky that we have a diverse student population. 10 to 15% in any given year of the student body is international, but being diverse in terms of numbers is not enough. What's really key here is that how do we make every student feel included in the campus, in campus activities, in the campus sort of atmosphere? So how do we integrate them? And I've been an international student myself many years ago, and I know sometimes that international students tend to live in their own ghetto. They tend to socialize only with other international students from their country or from their region, etc. It's very, very important, and it takes sort of a conscious effort to integrate international students on campus with the other local students, with the other international students coming from different regions, etc. So one of our sort of, I think, keys to success in that area is we have a dedicated office for international students. It's called ISA, International Student and Staff Affairs. We have a dedicated team of not a lot, but 3 people, and they have a lot of sort of administrative work that they do as well. They do, of course, organized orientation programs for incoming international full-time students. Especially full-time students have a lot of administrative issues such as acquiring their residence permits, etc. So they do a lot of administrative work as well, but part of their mandate, their sort of daily activities is that they also try to organize various events and activities that would help international students on campus to feel included, to be part and a contributing part of the student sort of life on campus. They also have physical spaces that they welcome international students. So this is really a hub of the international office and probably the most sort of visited, the most crowded part of our international office. So, for example, one of the activities that they do is they organize an international cultural day every year. This raises awareness about different cultures on campus. This is important for our local students to see international students. Some departments are very internationalized in terms of student numbers, the English medium programs, but not every department is like that. So it's important for some local students to be exposed to international students and their cultures outside of the classroom. So this is one way of doing that. Our exchange students, our full-time students, everybody, all the international students, participate in this event. They bring music, food, their traditional costumes to represent their culture that day, and it's a huge celebration. Again, probably all of you know this, but music, dance, and food really shine a wonderful light on cultures. It's the easiest way of sort of representing your culture and engaging other students' sort of curiosity and understanding and empathy in your culture. So we organize a lot of these sort of activities where international students prepare, whether they do it themselves or they may invite people from their communities for concerts, dancing events, music shows, etc. We also celebrate important dates, holidays, and we organize a lot of social activities. For example, for Muslim students, the whole holy month of Ramadan, we have, breaking fast together with international students and local students together. We are also now hosting students at sort of breaking fast dinners with other students or faculty on campus, etc. We organize other social events like a graduation party or an international talent show, etc. And our sort of office of international students uses social media very effectively to inform, to share good and also, bad days. The social media is used actively to celebrate important holidays together. But when there's, for example, an important sort of event like an earthquake or something like that, we share that information with our student population so that they can share each other's good and bad days and support each other. Another important stakeholder in this sort of campus integration and inclusion of international students is we have an international student union. So this gives international students a voice on campus. And what's important to me is that the International Student Union is a voluntary association, and all the international students get to elect by voting their own president. So this allows the students to be actively involved in campus life, to raise their concerns. Sometimes they have academic issues or other social, cultural adaptation issues. Plus, they organize many of these social events together with the administrative office that we have, but they are actively sort of involved and they have a voice on campus. Again, during the pandemic, of course, when students were not allowed on campus, it made it very difficult to have this inclusion of international students on campus. So we tried to do it through Zoom. It wasn't easy, but we did a lot of webinars on mental wellness, how to cope with the stress of the pandemic, of online education, etc. We again kept celebrating important national holidays or religious holidays with online events. We organized, I don't know, Netflix parties so that people could watch movies together and then discuss the movie afterwards online. So we try to emulate all these sort of campus activities that helps integrate and include international students on campus. We try to do it virtually. So looking ahead, as we came out of this pandemic, what have we learned? What can we keep? And what are still some challenges? We are very happy to be back on campus with face-to-face sort of education and all the social activities that we are organizing with local and international students on campus. But we have learned that virtual exchanges can increase access, inclusion to global learning opportunities. So we want to keep some of these. And we want to develop more COIL projects in the future for students who are not able to go on physical study abroad programs. We are currently developing a virtual module of our own with our academic staff to introduce Turkish culture, Turkish business environment, etc. So we are shooting sort of short clips right now, and we'll bring it together and offer it to our partner universities, and their students can take it either for credit or as a global learning certificate maybe. We have started some virtual internships, and we want to develop them because I think internships are important, and most of the time they are local. But Vishal was also mentioning this with the career fair. Now there are so many virtual job opportunities after graduation, and in order for our students to be prepared for these sort of remote global job opportunities, they should start with virtual internships during their studies. So we are trying to develop more of these with our international partners. Our challenge at this point is that we must involve more academic staff, especially when you have virtual projects such as COIL projects. These require a lot of sort of planning beforehand, and the whole semester has to be run sort of in an international collaboration mode virtually. This takes a lot of effort on academic staff, a lot of preparation, and they have already, of course, teaching workload. They have workload regarding quality assurance, many other administrative responsibilities, etc. So it is a challenge for the international officers, I know of all over the world, to include the academic staff more. Once you start internationalization at home and just move beyond physical mobilities, you realize that internationalization has to also move beyond the international office and really get into the faculties, the departments, and you need more active involvement of the academic staff. So this is really the key to success, I think, moving forward. So we have a lot of opportunities, I think, to include more students, a more diverse group of students for global learning in hybrid modalities. So we are happy that study abroad exchange programs are back. We are back on campuses, with our international student population, but we need to keep up some of the good lessons and the good practices learned during the pandemic and move forward in a hybrid modality. And in order to do this, have more sort of active involvement of the academic staff, not just the international offices. I think that's the biggest lesson, that internationalization at home has to be done, not just by the international office and the international officers, but everybody on campus, all the academic staff, all the academic units, as well as we need the support of other administrative offices on campus. This is what internationalization at home is really all about. And our sort of opportunity right now is that moving beyond the pandemic, we have important lessons learned, and we can keep what's best and move forward with a more sort of, I think, open mind about what internationalization is. So this is what I have prepared. I will stop sharing and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, IaH, for sharing with us all these amazing IaH initiatives at your university. So yeah, in fact, we already have some questions on the chat box, so I will read for you. So the first question was during your presentation about international students at your university. So Manisha asked, are there students from Nepal and Bhutan also at your university?
We may have few students from Nepal, but not Bhutan.
I see.
A lot of students from Afghanistan, Pakistan, some from Bangladesh, Nepal, Cambodia and Vietnam. I'm not so sure. I have to check.
Okay. Thank you. So another question from our host from Mahasarakam University. Which country do students come to exchange the most in your university?
Mostly from Europe. Exchange students are mostly from Europe through the Erasmus program. And within Europe, we have students from Germany and Poland the most. But again, I mean, all the other European countries are also represented. We have also, through the non-Erasmus, MOU cooperation, we have students from Mexico, Brazil, again, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Russia, Ukraine. So, I mean, a lot.
Okay, so there is a sharing. Okay, sharing. He asked, does your university provide PhD program in health science?
Yes, I think we do, but that's some of them are taught in Turkish, so not in English. But in dentistry and medicine, we have masters and specializations taught in English. So you can check our website. Students from Bhutan, I see like a chat question. They are welcome as well. Yes. Now, for many students who come to us as full-time students, they prefer the English medium programs. But there are some countries around Turkey where they speak a language that is very similar to Turkish. So they may also prefer Turkish medium programs as well. For example, from Azerbaijan, we have many students and they speak Turkish. So they enroll in, for example, health sciences programs, nursing, etc., taught in Turkish.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So other questions can be sent directly to the host of the conference, Mahasarakam University. Yes. Thank you very much, IaH. So
thank you for listening to me. Pleasure being here, and enjoy the rest of the presentations. I know Yuri is now waiting for his turn. So good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now it's time to introduce our last but not least presenter for today's event, Dr. George Turi. He is an associate professor at the Institute of Communication and Media Studies of Budapest Metropolitan University in Hungary. Dr. Turi has extensive experience on internationalization by conducting lectures and being guest speakers in many, many countries, such as US, Australia, Japan, several European countries, and many, many more. So today he is going to give a very interesting talk on the contemporary transnational higher education in the context of the global de-democratization process. Yes. So Dr. Turi, thank you for being with us, and the screen is yours. You are muted. Can you please? Dr. Turi, you are muted. We cannot hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Right. Wonderful. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very prestigious international conference. Very, very happy and feel privileged to be here. And I'm not quite sure if being the very last speaker is good or bad, but we'll see. What I can promise to you is that I'll deliver this talk, which I plan to be around 20-25 minutes, and then there might be a Q&A session if there are questions. What I want to point out is that I'm super happy to, be in touch with any of you here and get back to you with the answers. So you'll see my contact information on the last slide. So feel free to get back to me with any questions, because I don't want the audience to stay longer than they want to. So I want to share the screen, and hopefully it will work. You should let me know if I hit the share button, and hopefully
yes, everything okay.
Oh, that's pretty good news. Okay, so I'll start my stopwatch. And so this is indeed the title. I haven't changed the title. So this is the topic, which it's slightly different from internationalization at home, because this is what I was asked to do. And I want to start out with 3 stories. Do you see the next slide, the first slide? So has it moved?
Yes, we
Okay,
can see
good,
very
good,
well.
good.
Thank you.
Okay. So these are not anecdotes. These are stories, and all 3 of them happened to me in the past year and a half. And for reasons that I'll detail later on, they all shed light on a certain phenomenon or process that we can see taking shape globally in the world. And the 3 stories took place on campus here in Budapest, and as I told you, in the past year and a half. And very briefly, the context is the following. There's an Australian documentary on surveillance in China, which is a very well-balanced documentary. There are interviews with state representatives, party functionaries, and also people that kind of disapprove of that practice. So it's well balanced. There's the pro arguments, the con arguments, as it should be. And it was produced by prestigious award-winning team again in Australia. So it's like a 20-25 minute long video TV program. And I like to show it in class because it usually results in a very lively debate in the class. Needless to say, I show it to international students. It's not Hungarian students, but international students from all over the world, really. I mean, practically from all the continents. And once again, the topic is digital surveillance in China. Now, it was around a year and a half ago that one of the students, a Chinese student, walked up to me after class, carefully watching all the other students, especially the Chinese ones, leave the room. So she wanted to make it sure that it's only, herself and myself. And then she says that, Professor Turi, you're so brave. And, I told her, I'm really not a brave person. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm a coward, but I'm, very average on that front, certainly not brave. And I asked her, and I didn't really understand what she would, was why. And then I asked her, so why? And she said that because you showed such a documentary in class where there are other Chinese students, and they may report on the class at the embassy here in Budapest. And that was honestly shocking to me. First of all, because it had never happened to me before. Second of all, because, I'm a EU citizen living in my home country, and I really couldn't care less what the, Chinese embassy is saying about my class. They shouldn't say anything about it. It's none of their business. That's the end of the first story. The second story happened just 1 semester later. The context is the same. But the scenario has changed a little bit. So we watched the thing in class, and then from China, one of the students raises his hand and says that, Professor Turi, with due respect, I don't think we should show such thing in class because it sheds negative light on my country. And I said, to a certain extent, it really does, but, it's open to discussion. And I never share my own personal political views with the class because I don't think that's my job. Once again, in the second story, a university instructor is requested by a student not to do certain things in class on political grounds. The third one takes us to another country, metaphorically, because it's about a student from Kazakhstan, a very talented, very bright student. And she was in several of my classes. And she chose me as the supervisor of her thesis, and I was very, very happy to do that. So we started working on a topic, and then she had to move back to her country, and there were some, personal issues. So, we were in contact, but the work didn't go as well as we planned because there were interruptions. And then she reappeared earlier this year and, asked me to continue the work. And I was, very happy, told her that, she's, back on board again. So let's restart the whole project. And I suggested a slightly different topic about a scholarship program, an international student mobility scholarship program in Kazakhstan. There's very little English language literature on that, but I became interested in it, and I knew she was also interested in it. So once again, it's a state-sponsored scholarship program in Kazakhstan, the country where she was from. And after that email, she never got back to me again, which had, again, never happened before. So these are the three stories, and later on you'll see why I told them these stories, because these are personal stories, but they very much fit well into the larger context of my talk. The academic or research context is my work on transnationalism. I have a book proposal for that, and one chapter is completed on transnational professionals. In order to understand the wider context, I want to take a look at, some of the global issues in the past three and a half decades, roughly starting in the mid-1980s, for you to see where I want to get from this starting point. So we are in the mid-late 1980s, and we look at the global changes. And very obviously, most of you will have found out that what I'm talking about is the democratization waves that swept all across the globe in those years, in that short decade, so to speak, which was a life-transforming, life-changing experience for hundreds of millions of people. And of course, I could talk about my own personal experiences, being exactly 20 years old in 1989. So a young person who grew up in a communist country, and then all of a sudden, like this, was over, and we are free. It still gives me, goosebumps, honestly. And that was the experience for, again, hundreds of millions of other people in the so-called satellite countries of the Soviet Union, the communist bloc. And it was just like a dream. And similar processes took place in South America. Mostly right-wing military dictatorships came to an end in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and many other countries in South America. Again, starting a little bit earlier in certain cases, but then it's roughly the same periods. It's around 1990, give or take 5 years. And the last example, which is equally important, globally extremely important, the end of apartheid in South Africa, 1994. So what was in the air and on the ground in the 1990s all across the globe is a democratization, right? And people were all for it. And higher education, global higher education, and especially student mobility, internationalization, student and faculty exchange, joint research, they all contributed to this wonderful, wonderful, and very promising process, democratization. Of course, it had different functions and roles and aims as well, including economic reasons, humanitarian, ideological, and so on and so forth. And just to show you how global this thing was, I just want to mention some of these programs, and especially one that we are still enjoying in this consortium as well, the Erasmus program, which was established in 87, which was actually my last year at high school. So that opened up the world for many of us here and all around the globe. And then this went well into the 2010s. So internationalization, student mobility, faculty mobility, and so on and so forth. Now, if we talk about student mobility, on the global scale, you will see on this chart that here is 1990, which let's say is the year zero in terms of the global democratization processes. So you can see it's slightly more than 1 million students being involved, students and faculty, by the way. And then like 15 years later, it's 5 times more. There's a huge big increase up until the mid 2010s. Okay, so there's that dramatic change, and another dramatic change which has taken place in the past 10-15 years is the change of the shift of the direction of these mobilities from mostly being unidirectional to being a lot more multi-directional. And the Friends project being so wonderful and productive is a great example of that. And we can speak from personal experience. Again, if you allow me to be a little bit more personal, I'm very happy to share with you that I was totally amazed by the institutions, by the colleagues working in the South Asian countries that we visited and worked with, and I could learn so much from those people and from those institutions. And that's a huge thing, and that is really one of the results of this shifted mobility direction that I've been trying to talk about. In the next chart, what you see is slightly different. I mean, it's the same process, but put in a different context. And that, again, is, I think, very important for all of us, not only in the context of this conference, but the Friends and similar programs as well, is the very visible, almost dramatic slowing down of student mobility. This chart only shows the years up until 2016, which was 5-6 years ago, but I checked the most recent data and they are really not different. So there's no significant changes to this number, which is around 5 million students being globally mobile. And there are reasons for that. And there are solutions and answers to the questions. One of them is internationalization at home, about which many of my colleagues talked in this conference. I don't want to repeat the major issues. It's a wonderful, wonderful idea, and there's a lot of potential in that. What is a fact is that student mobility has dramatically slowed down and stays around the 5 million benchmark, globally speaking. Okay. Now, getting more closer to the heart of this research and the research questions that I want to answer in this short talk is another phenomenon which started roughly 15 years ago. And again, it's a global phenomenon. And you can see highlighted in blue the phrase which is used in the international academic literature to describe this process, which is de-democratization, which is not necessarily good news for many people, certainly not for me. I'm not a fan of that. If you look at the Freedom House reports, which might be contested, I know, but still it is a research institution that follows very strict methodological guidelines in ranking global and national issues. This is what they state in their most recent report on global freedom. You can read it for yourselves, and you see what is at stake here, and you see what the changes are all about. This process has been going on for more than 15 years, close to 20 years. And the result of that is the decline in global freedom. As you can see the numbers, it's almost 40% of the global population that live in not free countries. Another 40% live in partly free countries. I'm one of them. And it's only about 20% of the whole human population that live in free countries. And you can check out the, the interactive map on their webpage. If you do the math, talking about roughly 8 billion people, then it's around 1.5 billion that live in free countries, which is roughly the population of either China or India. So that's the number of people that live in free societies. And it's not because the remaining 6.5 million wouldn't want to. there are other reasons for that. So this is the closer context of what I'm trying to talk about. If you take a look at this next one, this diagram or chart, I'm not sure about the English, you see that it was in 2005, and I'm moving my cursor on this, it was in 2005, which is almost 20 years ago, when it was more countries in which freedom increased, or democratic values on this chart increased. And ever since then, there have always been more and more and more countries in which what we could witness was the decline of democratic values. Democracy deficit is another term which is used. And if you take a look at particular years, in 2009, it almost went up to 70 countries. In 2015, went above 70. Now, bear in mind, please, that the number of countries in the world is around 200. So more than 70 from 200 is a very, very, very significant proportion. It's a very high number. And if you take a look at the past couple of years, 68, 64, 70, 73, 60. So you see the process, what I'm talking about. I know I roughly have like 7 minutes, so I'll speed up a little bit. So this is the context. Well, some of you may say, and you would be absolutely, right in saying that I mean, there are variations on democracy, which is true, which is very, very true. So it's not only and necessarily and exclusively liberal democracy in the Western sense. It works in a very, very limited number of countries. And based on our experience in the past 30 years, very probably most of the countries that became independent and free around 1990, including mine, including many others, will never become liberal democracies in the classical sense. Whether it's a problem or not, it's really up to the individuals and the various nations to decide on. So there's this minimalist view of democracy, which only claims that regular contested elections should take place. There's the maximalist approach, and somewhere in between, there's this pragmatic approach, which also claims that there should be elections, the government should be held accountable to the citizens, but also, look at this part, there are some other necessary preconditions, like basic liberties, not super fancy, individual human rights, but basic liberties, including the ones that are listed here, for example, freedom of press and expression. And both are in danger in a growing number of countries all around the globe. So yes, it is true that there are variations on democracy, and the very definition of democracy is contested. It's not like 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, it's not mathematics, but still you see the global process. Now, when we take a look at transnational higher education, international student mobility in this context, and we also want to take a look at the sponsorship models that historically has made these mobilities possible. There are 2 or 3 major types. Self-sponsored mobility, meaning basically, the student themselves, more often than not, the parents, family, sponsoring, young, bright students to go abroad and study there. There's the grant-sponsored ones, and there's a third option sponsored by the host institution, in which the host institution offers basically scholarships to very, very talented students, which has certain connection with the phenomena that we call brain drain, but that's a completely different issue. Now, I want to look at, and this is the specific topic of my research in this aspect, I want to look at a relatively new 4th model in which it is the sending state that sponsors the mobility, as you can see on the slide. State-sponsored mobility for development, which is fine. I mean, this is very welcome. Development of the individual, development of the country, the economy, the political culture, and so on and so forth. But these scholarships, I'll take a look at 2 particular ones, one taking place or originating in Kazakhstan, and the other one in my own country, Hungary. So 2 ex-communist countries. They also serve, or might be seen to serve, legitimation and or stability of partly or non-democratic regimes. So how does that work? That is the big question. Very little literature in English on the Kazakh state, and practically 0 on the Hungarian one. In terms of the Kazakh case, I'm relying on the wonderful work of Adel Sordi. So these are the questions here. Could study abroad programs and internationalization sponsored by states be a space where the relationship between such states and their populations becomes apparent? The short answer is yes, and the details will be made clear in a couple of minutes. The second, very much related question is whether such programs, i.e. internationalization, themselves can contribute to regime stability. Again, the short answer is yes, and it's a brand new phenomenon. There's very little research on this aspect of international student mobility, so it's a topic that some of you might be interested in pursuing, and I'd be very happy to collaborate. And the last sentence on this slide once again reminds all of us here that this phenomenon is important enough in itself, but even more important in the context of the global trends described a couple of minutes ago, that is the global process of de-democratization. Now, the first case study is the Kazakh example, and probably you know a lot about both Kazakhstan and Hungary, but let me just list some of the most important pieces of information. Kazakhstan is the largest landlocked country in the world, the largest. close to 20 million people, pretty okay economy, and has been independent for more than 30 years. Before that, for around 70, that is 70 years, part of the Soviet Union, one of the states of the USSR. And out of 100 points, they got 23 from Freedom House last year. Just to give you some comparison, I think the US has 83, which is not very good. And there are very few countries with the maximum points. 3 out of the 4 Scandinavian countries, I think New Zealand, Iceland, and a couple other countries. But you can check it out. I mean, it's freely available. It's a wonderful interactive map. So, but it's not like, it's not like Stalin's Soviet Union. That's super important to keep in mind. It's a hybrid regime. And then, there's the big celebrations of independence a couple of years back in Kazakhstan, and the then president Nazarbayev addressed, his audience the following way, which you can read the very quote verbatim on the slide. And what we can see here is the juxtaposition of the Soviet days and the days of independence, and what he claims here that we live now in this independent country, and you're free to go abroad. You're very lucky. You're not followed by the secret services. Everything is open. You're happy people. So then what's the problem then? And you can check out this program Bolashak, which means future in the Kazakh language. And they have a pretty okay English language web page as well. So what is the problem then? Well, the problem is that based on the research of a couple of colleagues, it is nothing else basically but the renewal of this pre-existing social contract between the state itself and its citizens, which presupposes this all-knowing and all-caring and all-providing state. And the general acceptance of limitations to individual rights in exchange or in the name of something bigger. And it might sound scaringly familiar to many of us here, people who grew up in a communist country or any other authoritarian countries. The individuals might suffer. Actually, that's the price we pay for something bigger, because the ultimate aim is communism, or you name it. So there's something bigger, and the individual is not that important. And what this kind of thinking results in is this paternalistic relationship between the state and the population, which is not entirely healthy, in my view. What is expected of these students? And this program has been running for close to like 3 decades or 2.5 decades. So tens of thousands of Kazakh students took part in it, which means that they received their BA, MA, or PhD degrees from top-notch universities all around the globe. And most of them return to their countries. I mean, they make sure that most of them actually return and then loyally serve this state. And not only after the studies, but also during their studies, where and when they are kind of requested to be part of these Kazakh student alliances that are responsible for promoting the program, promoting the state ideology and related issues. Now, I know time is running short, so a couple more slides and then I'll wrap it up. The next one is a much smaller country. It's my country, and the population is roughly half of that of Kazakhstan. But in very stark contrast with Kazakhstan, we have been an European Union member for close to 20 years, a NATO member for close to 25 years. And economy is not really going great these days here, but you can see on the chart 69 out of 100 points, which is much better than Kazakhstan, but much worse than many other countries. And that last statement is especially painful for many of us here, that this is literally the only country out of the 27 in the EU which has been labeled only partly free by Freedom House recently. So that is the Hungarian context. And what is interesting is that this program, which was introduced much later than the Kazakh program, is extremely similar. By the way, because I didn't have much time, I couldn't go into details, but the Kazakh program was based on a program initiated by Singapore. So you can find it in the literature. There was a very similar program to that, and the Kazakh program kind of follows that one. I mean, the model is very similar. The Hungarian version, it's interesting that on their webpage, which is available in a couple of languages, including English, at least on the Hungarian one, they claim that it's a very unique program globally, which is just not true, because this program is state-sponsored scholarship for outgoing students. For something to expect from the returning students. So they're the A, B, and C component of that program. The A sponsors the entrance fees, or entrance exam fees of these young talented people, because sometimes it costs a lot of money. Component B would mean the sponsoring of the first year of the studies, including tuition, living expenses, travel, health insurance, and stuff. And the C component, which really makes it the whole package, finances the whole process. So getting the degree, which is more often than not a B or PhD, it's not the PhD degree, really at the very, very best universities in the world. On my list, you can see a couple of examples. And what is very, very telling, at Central European University is not on the list, although Central European University is on the list of the best universities in many, many rankings, including the Times Higher Education, the Shanghai list, and so on and so forth. That is the university which was forced to leave my hometown, Budapest, 2 or 3 years ago, and relocate to Vienna for, you guessed it, political reasons. And it was founded by no one else but the Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros, who is the arch enemy of the Hungarian government, they claim. So what is expected of these young students upon their return? Very similar things to the Kazakh students. And my question once again is, what's wrong with the running of the program? What's wrong with standing out very, very young, very talented, bright students? There's nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, it is wonderful. The problem with that is the selection process. It is well documented that they are non-independent academics, and worse than that, politicians who have the final word on the selected few. Just imagine, you can go to Yale, you can go to Harvard, you can go to Sorbonne, Heidelberg, Fudan. Everything is covered by the state. But there is something in exchange, and it's not serving the country, it's serving one political regime, which I think is not right. There is only one major Hungarian research on the topic, and this is a wonderful, wonderful and very telling quote, verbatim, once again, coming from one of the participants. They are invited to a summer camp in July usually, and that's where the final decisions are made. And this is that one of the students saying that he felt a sense of hypocrisy at being held accountable for honesty by politicians while being at the mercy of their decisions. And it's a very artificial thing, you know, having to directly address the president of the country, the bishop, politicians, people very, very close to the prime minister, the president of the country, and they decide on that. My question, to be very brutally honest, why is it not non-Hungarian, absolutely independent academics that decide on the future of these very talented young people? Well, I think it's the last but one slide, so I can keep the 40-minute time limit, and we still have 5 more minutes for Q&A. It's at 35 minutes by now. Another candidate remarked that the government they serve has never rewarded open debate and expression. So what makes anyone think that such a valuable scholarship will be any different? Why would that be the case? And actually, it is not the case. And, you know, London School of Economics is certainly not a communist institution, but one of the best institutions of higher learning in the world, and it does not propagate gender ideology. So there's some confusion on the part of decision makers because they've never been abroad studying at top-notch universities, and they are the ones who decide on the fate of these young people. I think it's like 2 more pictures for you, and I'll explain the importance. So you can see these young people doing their thing they have to do, and hopefully in the following fall, they will find themselves as being students of top-notch universities. On the other side, you have the 2 figures, the 2 people in the middle. So one of them is the president of the country, the first female president of the country, and the person sitting to her is kind of her mentor, who used to be a minister, now a bishop, you know, dressed in, you know, fashionably in shorts and stuff. And they are the ones who are watching these young people trying to get the scholarships. So again, the same 2 characters. She is the president of the country. This guy is a bishop. And these are the candidates. And, you know, this camp is like 2 or 3 days, and then the end of that, based on the impression of mostly these 2 people and similar politicians, the decisions are reached. So this is the last slide. And in conclusion, what we can say is that the practices that I presented here, they demonstrate that the freedom of movement is no longer an evil to be avoided by authoritarian regimes, which has always been the case up until now. But in this globalized transnational world, it really is no longer. But it can become an asset in terms of legitimacy and cooptations, 2 of the pillars of authoritarian or semi-authoritarian regimes. Okay, they can be assets in this process and become tools in the execution of soft power within, and for us, much more interestingly and importantly, beyond the nation state. So that's why I talked about the transnational space, which is being created by these programs. So this is the conclusion, and once again, there's very little research on this, and I just hope that some of you became interested in the topic. And I want to thank once again for the organizers and the audience to be patient and for listening to me. So I want to thank you all for being here, and you can see my contact information. And I'll stop the sharing, and we have like, I think, a minute for Q&A, but I'm at your disposal via email or Zoom or anything. Okay, so thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Turi, for this highly informative presentation. I'm sure that our audience now have a lot of questions. So I see something in the chat, trying to open up. So yes. Let's see some questions from our audience. Everybody, please feel free. If you would like to address by yourself or your question, you can raise your hand. Okay, so one question. from
Yes, I can see the question.
Okay. Okay. No
Yes,
question.
designating fields, absolutely. Yes, it's a very, very
Yes.
smart question, and there is a reason for that, because they want to see that, you know, the economy wants more engineers, more whatever, and of course, those are the privileged fields of study. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. So elaborating on this, which field of study are more
Well, it's
more likely
it's
to
more
get
like more like in the economic fields. It's not like the humanities, less so the social sciences, and of course information technology, digital technology. So those industries that that define global economy these days.
Okay.
If there's nothing.
So anyone else have a question for Dr. Turi? I would like to ask a question. Okay. So Dr. Turi, I saw that these are the scholarships granted by the state, yes. But how about the other programs, like your university is involved also in Friends Project and in other Erasmus projects? Is there any influence on the other internationalization programs at the universities?
What do you mean by any influence?
Like influence, political influence, because that's
No, not really. No. That's a very different thing. So that's why I wanted to make it very clear that there are various types of international student mobility based on the sponsoring aspect, and these are state-run, state-sponsored scholarships. So that's different. The Friends it's an EU-sponsored thing that we are doing here. So
exactly.
Yes. No. It's very different.
Like Fulbright also, I suppose that there is, they are different.
No, Fulbright, you know, sends out scholars and also, you know, welcomes international students professors and students in the US. I was a Fulbright professor at Ohio State University, so I know the program from the inside. Very different, and there's no political expectations. I can speak from my personal experience. Zero, nothing.
That's
really
great. That's great. Yes.
And
great
I think Josh has the hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure, please.
Okay, Dr. Turi, you cited the Freedom House multiple times.
Yes.
But I would like to ask, what do you think about the fact that it was sponsored by the United States? It's essentially a US organization. Do you think that could have introduced any kind of bias into like more lenience towards the American interests, and outside the American sphere is more strict? Could that be a possibility?
You know, it is one of those criticisms that very often come up. The thing is that it is really based in the US, but they work with an international research team, and they have very, very strict research methodology, which is made public on their website. On the other hand, once again, I think I quoted the numbers, the US has only 83 points out of 100, which is not very, very good. So, you know, there's many countries that rank much higher than the United States. So again, it's not mathematics. So I'm pretty sure that there is bias. I'm pretty sure it's not an objective picture, but I'm also very sure that there's no such thing as an objective, you know, picture when it comes to these questions. You know, of course, there will always be a bias when you do a list like that and when you rank countries according to this and that. So partly you're right, but I think, I mean, it's still the best we have. You know, I mean, you can criticize these reports, but come up with an alternative, I say to the critics, you know. So yeah, that's the short answer, but the smart question, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from our audience? We still have with us more than 100 people, so okay. If not, I remind you.
Very
sorry,
tired.
yes, please. Yes, I would like to remind to our participants that they can also send their questions later if they get question later, to our host, Maha Sarakam University, yes, and they will convey the questions to our speakers, yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you once again, Dr. Turi, and
thank you.
Yeah, wonderful, perspective.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and I think now it's time to close our Friends Thailand National Conference on Internationalization at Home. Thank you all for participating, and thank you for allowing us to go a little bit overboard. The subjects are all interesting, yes, and we had some questions, and it was very nice to discuss on. So we also would like to thank once again to all our expert speakers, excellent talks, and we wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Okay,
Thank you
sorry,
very
I
much.
think I
Bye-bye.
forgot. Yes. Yes, please. Who's talking?
I don't know, but we can.
Yes. So sorry, I forgot to remind everyone about the evaluation form. Please, you have the QR code on the screen. You can scan it, or in the chat box, you can still find the link. My colleague will share it again. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.